Today we are looking at the infamous, maybe the most infamous trade outside of the Herschel Walker trade in NFL history, the Ricky Williams trade. The New Orleans Saints, the Washington Redskins, the Chicago Bears, and kinda the Cincinnati Bengals will be part of our discussion today. We're going to take a look at the trade tree and see exactly what each team acquired, how it all worked out, what ended up eventually happening, and who actually won the trade, who lost the trade, and how each team fared in the upcoming years. All right, now, when you first think about this, okay, now it's been a long time. All right, I was young. I was a wee lad, barely even watching sports at this time. But when you first think about this trade, who do you think won the trade? When you first think about this trade, who do you think lost the trade? Okay, we're going to look at this from a Saints point of view first. So Mike Ditka is the head coach of the New Orleans Saints. Fun fact, in 1998, so the previous draft, Ditka tried to do this exact same thing. He tried to trade his entire draft for a player. Now, this is an interesting concept. At this point, draft capital is not that important. At this point, they don't understand. The draft is not as fleshed out as it would be later on. It was much more of a top-heavy kind of thing where you're either getting an absolute superstar or it's kind of falling apart later on, whereas now you can really find value later on. So Ditka's thought process is, I want to trade the entire draft. I want to trade all of this unknown for what I think is the most known asset. In the 1998 draft, that would have been Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf. Now, both teams, the Colts and the Chargers, both turned down Ditka, and so we're not sure who he would have taken. If he got the first pick, does he take Manning? Does he take Leaf? If he gets the second, we don't know all that stuff. So, but it is interesting that he was pretty much full on with this strategy. And this was a legitimate strategy. It wasn't just Ricky Williams related. Now this comes around. All right. Ditka, of course, was the Chicago Bears head coach whenever Walter Payton was there. So it's not surprising that he would want to do this again and target Ricky Williams. So he does this again. He says, we're going to trade everything to make sure we can get Ricky Williams. But he doesn't get to the Redskins first. He gets to the Bengals. The Bengals have the 3rd overall pick at this point in the 1999 draft. Ditka offers the same deal to the Bengals, and the Bengals say no. And the Bengals say no because they have their guy, Achilles Smith, quarterback out of Oregon. So the Cincinnati Bengals could have received the haul that the Redskins ended up getting, but they turned it down and said, we are not doing that. Said, we're good, we're holding pat. In comes Washington. Washington says, we'll do it. We'll make the trade for you. So Washington accepts the trade. But Washington wants Champ Bailey the entire time. That's their guy. So they make the trade, but they have to figure out, how can we get back into the top 10? In comes the Chicago Bears. So now we have the context. The Saints make the trade. The Saints trade everything for Ricky Williams, number 5 overall. The Washington ends up trading back into the first. They get the 7th overall pick. They take Champ Bailey. Okay. Chicago gets the 12th pick. They take Cade McNown. All right. And then, of course, like I said, Cincinnati takes Achilles Smith. Now, what's interesting about Washington is that Washington wasn't bad. Washington at this time was 10-6, or they go 10-6. But the following year, the Saints were not good. The Saints went 3-13. So the Saints had the 2nd overall pick, which is now Washington's. Washington also had the 3rd overall pick because of a trade with the San Francisco 49ers. So they have the 2nd and 3rd overall picks after going 10-6. And I'm pretty sure winning the division. I'm pretty sure going to the playoffs. So you would think Washington is absolutely set up. They nail their pick at 7 with Champ Bailey. Champ Bailey is good, right? Champ Bailey ends up being very good. They're already good. They won the division. They're going to the playoffs. And now they have the 2nd overall pick and the 3rd overall pick. And one of those picks, LaVar Arrington, ends up being good. So let's look at what happens in the 2000 draft. In the 2000 draft, Washington goes LaVar Arrington, 2nd overall, Chris Samuels, 3rd overall. All right. Chicago ends up going Brian Urlacher at 9 overall. Hell of a pick from Chicago there. Okay. Now let's keep on moving down the tree. For the Saints, it doesn't work out with Ricky Williams. Okay. Ricky Williams, whether it's because of off-field stuff or just the Mike Ditka situation, Ditka ends up getting fired. It's just a mess all around. It was not a good, I was going to say not a good marriage, but that brings up the ESPN magazine cover, or was it Sports Illustrated, with Ricky Williams and Mike Ditka. But they end up trading Ricky Williams for a 1st, a 4th, and a 3rd. Now, the 3rd is conditional, and the 3rd ends up, I'm doing all of this off the top of my head, all right, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, so if something gets mixed up, forgive me. The 3rd becomes a 1st-round pick because of how good Ricky Williams was in Miami. The Saints get Charles Grant, Q Craver, and they trade that pick to the Arizona Cardinals. All right. They trade up to get Jonathan Sullivan. Is how they end up doing it. They trade up again. So they have a 1st-round pick. They're moving around. They trade up. So they go from where they were to 6 to get Sullivan. All right. Arizona, with the package that they traded to the Saints, get Calvin Pace, Bryant Johnson, and then Anquan Bolden. The Saints end up getting Jonathan Sullivan, John Stinchcomb, Montre Holland, which is interesting. Over on the Washington side, Washington ends up taking some more players. You can see them here. It is notable the Champ Bailey ends up being traded to Denver for Clinton Portis, straight up, basically. I remember that very, very well. I remember that trade. It was like a Madden trade. Chicago, what did they do with all this? Cade McNown, Dwayne Bates, Kari Samuel, Warwick Holdman, Jerry Wisn, Dustin Lyman, LOL. Okay? So this is it. This is the trade tree. Now, what's interesting about this is that I would assume at the beginning of this exercise, the thought is the Saints get the worst of it. The Saints traded their entire draft, right? They have to get the worst out of it. But that's not true. The team that got the worst out of it, in my opinion, are the Cincinnati Bengals. Because the Cincinnati Bengals not only didn't get any draft capital, they also whiffed on their 3rd overall pick. Now, I have up here the records from when the trade happens for the next 10 years. And let's take a look at how it all played out over the course of 10 years. Washington ends up going 86-106 between 1999 and 2010, which, like I said, is really kind of surprising because you go 10-6, you get the picks, then you go 8-8, 8-8, 7-9, 5-11, 6-10, 10-6, 5-11, 9-7, 8-8, 4-12, 6-10. And when you look at that tree, it's like, man, not only did they get a ton of picks, but they also got good players. They got LaVar Arrington. They got Champ Bailey. Like, I understand that they moved some stuff around. You know, they moved some picks around in order to get Champ Bailey, and then you also, like, they're also okay. They're good at the time. But there was other mismanagement. They go and get Deion Sanders, give him a huge contract. You know, it was just a mess. So Washington ends up going, whatever I said, 86-106. If you look at their playoffs, so 1999, they go to the playoffs. They're 1-1. They don't go to the playoffs again until 2005. They're 1-1. So since the trade happened, Washington won one game, two playoff games since 1999. So they go 2-1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2-7. All right. Now the Saints. Oh, let's do the Bears. Let's do the Bears next. Let's do the Bears. The Bears. So the Bears get a haul. None of this is very impressive. They do hit later on with Brian Urlacher. They do make some good picks moving forward, whatever. The Bears end up going 98-94. So they have a pretty good stretch there, including some playoff success, all right? So the Bears come out of this looking pretty good. The Saints come out of this looking pretty good. The Saints end up going 97-95. So right there with the Bears. 1999 happens. Then they go 10-6, then 7-9, 9-7, 8-8, 8-8. Katrina hits 3-13, and then they explode. 10-6, 7-9, 8-8, 13-3 with a Super Bowl, and then 11-5, and the rest is history, right? If you look at the Bengals, though, 76, 115-1, by far the worst out of this group. The team that chose to do nothing, by far, did the worst because they realized no value. They got nothing for the third overall pick. They didn't get any draft capital, and they completely flounder for the next decade, where they go 4-12, 4-12, 6-10, 2-14, 8-8, 8-8, 11-5, 8-8, 7-9, 4-11, 10-6, 4-12. You look at playoff success, the Saints, you can see it right here. So 1990, 2000, they go 1-1. 2006, they go 1-1. 2009, they go 3-0. They win it all, and you can see the rest, right? And then the Bengals, to no surprise, in 1999, they don't make it. 2000, they don't make it. They don't make it until 2005, and they don't win a playoff game until 2021. Okay, and remember, we're looking at this in 2009. So from 1999. From 1999 to 2021, the Bengals did not win a playoff game. It's really an interesting case study because you could argue that none of these teams really won nor lost the trade. You could say that it kind of just canceled each other out. You could argue the Saints ended up getting some pieces. You know, they ended up getting Charles Grant. They ended up getting John Stinchcomb and Jonathan Sullivan. They moved some stuff around. It is what it is. Miami got a really good player in Ricky Williams. You could argue that Washington got some decent players, but didn't really do much with it. You could argue that Chicago didn't make much out of the trade, but had a good stretch there. And then Cincinnati, I would say lost the trade. So it's just an interesting kind of, it kind of rocks how you look at the draft and how you look at draft capital and how you look at draft picks and what they really mean and all of that. You know, like this kind of thing with the Saints, when this trade happens and it kind of implodes, you would think, okay, well, this team is like giving itself the death penalty. This team is setting itself back, you know, decades and generations, and how are they going to get out of this hole? But they win the Super Bowl 10 years later. Not even, right? Like, and they have relative success almost immediately. You know, the Saints go, boom. All of a sudden, they're 10-6. Like, the year with the Ricky Williams' rookie year, yes, total disaster, for sure. But then, 10-6, okay, now we're kind of floundering around 800. We're kind of just righting the ship. And then one bad year, 3-13. We all know what happens after that. So, this idea of like, you know, you hit the draft or you're screwed, or if you trade picks, you're screwed, or if you trade up, you're screwed, or if you do this, you're ruining the franchise. There's so many extra things happening around a team and around a draft and around success to hone in and hyper focus in on draft capital, draft picks, not wanting to trade up, wanting to keep your 4th round pick, wanting to keep your 5th round pick, like trade back so you get more draft capital, like all of that, there's more to it. You know, and I always say draft picks and especially 1st round picks are the most overrated concept in sports. And I think, or definitely in the NFL. And I think something like this kind of shows that. What else is interesting is if Ditka isn't wrong, or not, Ditka wasn't wrong necessarily, but if Williams pans out, this changes everything. Because Ditka is kind of on the right track of, hey, look, screw all those picks. You can have Cade McNown, Dwayne Bates, Warwick Holdman, Jerry Wisnett, Dustin Lyman, Kerry. You can have all those guys. Give me the MVP. If Ricky Williams is, you know, whatever, LaDainian Tomlinson, if he is the MVP, if he is a 10-year best running back in the NFL, God forbid if he's Peyton Manning, right? This works out. If this is for the year prior, if this is 1998, if the Colts do business, if they take Peyton Manning, you could argue Lloyd Harrison, LaVar Arrington, Billy Mueller, Desmond Clark, Kerry Samuel, Nate Stimson, Dwayne Bates, Cade McNown, Warwick Holdman, Jerry Wisna, Dustin Lyman, Champ Bailey, Tatum Bell, and Clinton Portis wouldn't be worth Peyton Manning, right? Because of the value of a quarterback and what he meant to a team and what Peyton Manning ended up going. Now, you never know. You never know what the draft pick's going to do. But nailing the player, getting the player, getting the MVP, getting the All-Pro, getting the superstar is so much more important than, well, we've got 2 fifths and we've got a 4th and we've got 2 thirds and we've got 2 7ths and we got whatever. Because in reality, you've got Bryant Johnson and K.U. Craver and Montre Holland and John Jansen and Tony Bryant and Kerry Samuel and Desmond Clark and Billy Miller and Derek Smith and Lloyd Harris. You have a bunch of just rotational pieces, right? So interesting stuff to look at. You know, I certainly didn't know the tree. I certainly didn't know how far it went down and who was part of it or whatever. But I think it is something that people will be surprised at. And even just the flow of how the teams kind of fared afterwards. Like just the flow of what happened to the Saints afterwards. Like they had a bad year. Yeah, they had a bad year when Ricky Williams was a rookie. They fired Ditka. But then it all kind of evens out. And not only evens out, but in a relatively short period of time, they win the Super Bowl. And that's even if you factor in them 4 years later saying, hey, screw it, brother. We're trading up again. We're undeterred. We're trading up into 6 to take Jonathan Sullivan. The Sullivan draft, so I went back and looked at that. They, kind of a weak draft. Like if you look at this, like where else are you going to go? Like you trade up into 6, like Byron Leftwich, whatever. Like some of these guys, it's like, Terrell Suggs is obviously really good, but this is an interesting draft right here. Very interesting draft. Then 2000, we were looking at Washington, right? So you look at this draft for Washington. Like I said, LaVar Arrington, really good player. But Peter Warwick, it's interesting when you go back and look at these drafts. Like, damn, Sebastian Janikowski going 17th overall. Imagine what that would do in today's NFL. Imagine what that would do in just imagine social media if a team took a kicker 17th overall. Crazy, right? But let me know in the comments below. What'd you think? Did you learn something? Did you realize this is how it all played out? Who do you think won the trade, lost the trade? Did anyone win the trade? Did anyone lose the trade? My pick is Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati, out of the entire situation, lost because they did not make the move. And then they blew the pick. If they nail the pick, if they nail it, even if they just take Torrey Holt, even if they just take, there's some bombs in here though. You talk about, it just shows you how many, Achilles Smith. Yeah, he was a bust, but Tim Couch was a bust too, and then you're looking at David Boston, huge bust. Cade McNown, bust. There's all these landmines inside of a draft. Yeah, there's some hits, sure. But that's what I always say. You can have the top 5 picks, and you're not hitting on all of them. Just like Washington. They had the 2nd and 3rd pick, and it didn't make a damn. Didn't matter at all. You have the top 3 picks here. You get 3 quarterbacks. Complete bust in Achilles Smith. Complete bust in Tim Couch. Donovan McNabb, good. But even McNabb, it's his ceiling was whatever. He was never, however, I think McNabb was good, but he certainly wasn't, elite, the elite of the elite. If you go back in this draft, who goes first overall? Maybe Torrey Holt, I guess. Torrey Holt goes first overall. Is that how it plays out? All right, let me know in the comments below what you thought. I had a little fun with this one on a Saturday, and I will see you in the next video.